if the cable's long enough. So. You want it? I don't think the cable's, well, maybe. No, I don't dare move it, so you want me to move it back on this side again? Yeah. Sure. Welcome to this session on analyzing user needs. This is a session with 3 speakers, all of them providing different perspectives on how we analyze what the user really needs and how to build on those requirements that we gather. The first speaker is Mike Norris, who's CTO at HEANet, the Irish Research and Educational Network.
Thank you, Ingrid. First of all, I must apologize for my state of undress. I forgot my badge, but I am Mike Norris, honestly. Well, my talk is very loosely coupled with user requirements, but I do strongly believe in keeping very closely in touch with user requirements, and I hope in a fairly roundabout way to come to that through some observations I've made in the past year. The kind of things I'm going to talk about are as follows. I'll start with some dialectics, beginning with last year, but it won't get too heavy, so don't worry about it. No philosophers mentioned. Then have a look at some of the projections that have been made for future behavior, looking at traffic in particular, but also capacity and perhaps some other measures. Then we look at capacity and see how that has evolved, really summarizing what most people know. A very personal look at some of the growth factors, some of the stimulators of growth, and some of the inhibitors as well. Then some actual measured traffic, which one of my points in this is that it's getting increasingly hard to find measured traffic nowadays. A lot of it it's there all right, but it's pretty well hidden away, and I'm a bit worried about that. Then a few other metrics, then traffic, just general measures of activity on the internet and trends, if you like, and finally some conclusions. So here's the syllogism, and really, if any of you were at the Poznan conference last year, you might recognize it. It comes from one of the speakers, and he was talking about the needs of high-end research users. And this is what he said, I quote, his slides are still there on the website. When I hit enter on my laptop, I want the solution to this very complex calculation to appear on my screen as a volumetric rendering within a fraction of a second. And he was very insistent on that. If it didn't, the reason usually given to him was that there wasn't enough bandwidth. And then the third part of the syllogism, must be a third part, is, so we must redouble our efforts and light more dark fiber. Now all of that's in quotes, but it's also on the website. It was what was said last year. And this worried me a bit because, quite honestly, I know quite a few scientists and researchers, and none of them really, they're all very polite because they certainly aren't as vehement as the first statement there. They make requests, but they're realistic about it and they're very collaborative about it. But I guess he was just being provocative, as he should be, and making a point. So anyway, that led me to, it reminded me of something that was said by an American about 100 years ago. And he said that when you redouble your efforts and you've forgotten your aim, that's fanaticism. I'm not making any accusations, but I'm just reminding people that we can't just keep going on preserving momentum based on past behavior. But to assuage everybody, the same guy also said that for every wise saying, there's an equal and opposite one. Right. I haven't found the one for that one yet, but I'm sure there is one. Okay, now some projections, and this is based on a study which involved a lot of players from the community, various sectors within the community, research and education, and also from industry and from the legal side and from the stakeholders in government and elsewhere. And the findings which were produced at the end of 2003 came to a number of conclusions. These are just some of them. There's going to be very demanding applications around the way, and the network requirements will grow dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years. Géant, the trend line is 80 times, an 80 times increase in 5 years. And terabits per second networking will be here everywhere. Everywhere by the end of the decade. Again, on the Terena website, or sorry, on the Serenate website, which was led by Terena. And also, this is in the one of the documents coming out of Serenate. This is actual projections of traffic, and you know, these were made by one of the consultants as input to the study, and that was his findings. Research traffic would be at over 15,000 terabits per second, terabytes throughput by the end of this year. I'll come back to that very shortly. Now here's another study, and again, this is one which involves all of us, the Terena Compendium. It's going on right now for 2006, but here are some results based on findings in 2000 and 2005. So a reasonably long baseline there. And what in each year, people are asked to make projections of what they think the capacity will be in their network in 2 years' time. And that was the view in 2000 on the left-hand side, and the right-hand side, that was the view in 2005. Now you'll notice that in the earlier one, there were a lot of people saying that in 2 years, their network will grow by a factor of 100. In other words, there's a fairly big distribution there, and a lot up at the, quite a lot at 10 times in 2 years. Moving on 5 years, we don't get as big. People aren't as sanguine as that. I think they're still being very realistic, but the spread we're getting is a lot smaller. Now these are projections which people are asked to make, which has a lot of it is guesswork, and I'm keen that we keep this question, however vague it is, because I think it also gives us an indication of how confident people feel in the industry. You know, if you say, yes, I think my network is going to grow 100-fold in the next 2 years, you know, you're feeling pretty bullish about it, and you're confident, and that's good. But for whatever reason, the forward projections in 2005 are a good deal less than they were earlier. The results for 2006 aren't in yet. As I say, the questionnaire is ongoing at the minute, but it might be interesting to see what changes there are. And here's, this is Géant and its predecessors. Just to remind people that beginning with ICSI in the early 1990s, starting at 64K and 128K connections into the ICSI cloud. So that was roughly the capacity of the network. We've increased by a factor of about 1 million. It's a logarithmic scale. So we've increased by a factor of 1 million in 15 years or so. It's tremendous. It's a fantastic achievement, and the fact that it has kept together the education and research community over many migrations like this is an achievement in itself. Not just technical, I think organizational too. It's been something very good. Anyway, look at some growth factors, some of the causes behind growth. First of all, well, more client institutions. These have been, over the years, although not so much nowadays, more and more institutions have been connecting to the networks. And more users within those institutions as the use of the network becomes more widespread in the student population. More pervasive use within the student base, but also elsewhere, from outside the campus, from around the campus, wireless and other connections like that. much more intensive applications have become possible. And of course, research users have really taken to the network. It enables many things, just a few of which we've seen today, but I guess a common thread running through a lot of them is the ability to, to share expensive infrastructure over a wide distance and to open up really expensive scientific equipment to many researchers, and that the network has used that very significantly. And research infrastructures themselves, if you plonk a high-end computer in the middle of your network, it's almost automatically going to generate traffic. Users will come to it. And even one or two users can generate a lot of traffic to a well-connected and intensive resource like that. So the users and the infrastructure I consider separately, because they are additive, but they are separate. And finally, new sectors. I think, again, coming from Serenate, because of the remit to look at other sectors such as education, such as culture, libraries, other institutions like that, medicine and so on. These were mentioned earlier today, and I'm delighted to see many of these now being connected to the infrastructure, the research and education infrastructure. That's great. And some extrinsic factors to growth, not intrinsic, not depending on the function or the needs themselves, but if there's more money around for this, and in my own country, for example, we've seen not networking per se, but certainly for research budgets over, say, 5 years now, collectively add up to about €1 billion. I mean, that's a significant amount of money in a small country, but it's indicative of the emphasis on research, on attracting high-end researchers into the country and stimulating those inside the country and providing them with the proper tools, including networking. And the amount that is devoted to research networking out of that is less than 1%, but it's good because it's linked to a piece of national policy on research and development. Economies of scale, of course, these also make growth more. They stimulate growth more. Wavelengths cheaper than SDH. We've seen debates on this during the week, and it's been great to see that people are taking up the opportunity to buy in bulk, if you like, and to start managing things at lower layers themselves, because it makes economic sense. Whether they need it, whether they need all that capacity or not is another thing, but I'm just saying that it's easier to buy into that now. Gigantism, just because it's there. Somebody said 100 gigs, yeah, we better do it. We better get that interface, we better get that developed, because we don't want to be surprised. We want to be up with the Joneses. We want to be on the same map as the other research networks. If we're not, questions will be asked. These are important things in framing policy. You've got to answer to the stakeholders, and if they say locally, why isn't Ireland on that map? You've got to have good reasons. And of course, networking research itself, and we heard that this morning, very good cases for building networks to research networks and using real networks so that all the vicissitudes of cross-traffic and all of that is there for you to experiment with. Some growth inhibitors, and these are taken from one of the speakers at last year's Trainer Conference, Networking Conference, Ed Seidel, from Louisiana. And he said that some of the inhibitors are you don't provide enough end-to-end bandwidth. In other words, you're not going to see the traffic. Why aren't we seeing this traffic? And his answer was, well, you're not providing enough end-to-end bandwidth. There's congestion in the campus, or we can't connect to the network. We can't. The last mile problem we mentioned, and of course QoS, end-to-end guarantees of service. He said weren't there, and these are explanations as to why, with all the capacity there, we're not really seeing, in many cases, the bandwidth being filled. And finally, some limiting factors. These are some intrinsic factors which are going to limit the amount of growth. They're not boundary conditions, because many of them can be pushed outwards, but the core constituency is finite. It's not like in the commercial sector where you're pushing out new products to new markets all the time. Your market size in terms of institutions and people is finite by definition if you're devoted to education and research. And in many cases that is saturated, certainly in terms of usage. Over the years we saw the usage of the network trickle down from the top, from the researchers and the faculty and so on, down through the final year students, and finally, I guess, every student now on entry uses the network, indeed is obliged to use the network. Learning and thinking, these also go on in our institutions, and which means that sometimes we have to turn off the computer and go and do some learning and thinking. These can actually be done without a computer, and there are lots of examples of those. So these things do have to go on. The digital divide. Oh, did I mention the digital multiply? I think we saw that in the slide on growth, where things are just multiplying by a certain factor. But the digital divide is inhibiting growth in certain areas where, within our own community in Europe, because of market conditions or lack of market competitive conditions, we are seeing huge inhibitors to growth in terms of large prices. And that affects us all. I mean, if one NREN or even part of one NREN can't afford the connectivity, we are all the less for it. The pool of resource that we have is diminished, and that's bad. There's a lower limit on telco cost cutting, although that seems to go down all the time as well. But I guess there is, if we're dealing, and I think some of us found this out over the last few years, if we're dealing with the market, we've got to make sure it's a healthy market. We've got to minimise risk and make sure there's some stability there, some continuity in the market, and that means we deal with successful companies who make profits. Time is finite. Again, I probably said this already, but there are 24 hours in the day, and you've got other things to do than use the computer. You can't. I suppose you can get computers to run computers for you, but you've got to go and not just watch the game of football. You've got to play football. You've got to do things, and we can't spend all our time on the network. Great. And finally, Occam's razor. This is an old saying by a philosopher, not a technician. But anyway, he said, in Latin, of course, that's what he spoke, entiam non sunt multiplicanda praeter necessitam. Don't make things more complicated than is necessary. And okay, you can talk about the next generation applicants or applications we can't even imagine. But I get worried when people start talking about things which they can't really define. It's a convenient catch-all when you want to persuade people that you really do need more money. You want to be ready for the unexplained, but you are making things more complicated. And I think things are complicated enough. We've plenty to do in improving the things that we do know about. Yes. I always like showing this slide, how to fit it in. It's got something to do with growth. It's some measures in our own network since 1991, so it's covering about 15 years. 14 years in the case of personnel, staff. You notice the staff one only begins in 1992. We didn't have any staff before that. And we start with 1. Again, notice it's a logarithmic scale, so we're multiplying as we go up. And you'll see that the staff hasn't gone up as high. Tim Marshall would be pleased with that. We've kept control of the head count. But you'll see that there have been some earlier growth there, certainly in external bandwidth, but it's beginning to, right now, and it may only be temporary, but that's beginning to level off a bit. The growth in earlier years is not in quite so much in evidence now, but again, it could take off. And the number of clients we have, which emphasizes what I said before about the limited constituency and saturation of that, that's been almost steady from, over the last 10 years. We only have so many higher education institutions in the country, and we serve them all. Now, some other trends on a European scale, when we're looking at, say, 10155 and its successors in Géant2, and this time we look at the total traffic and the annual growth rate. So we're looking at the, if you like, the derivative of the actual traffic. And we can see that about 4 or 5 years ago, there was considerable growth in the network, but of late it's been lesser. Year on year, it's been around 20 or 30% of late. Again, there are signs there that it may recover, and I haven't done measurements up to the last quarter, Q1 2006, but I suspect that it is picking up a bit again. But it's certainly not, in the league of doubling every year, or even every year and a half. And here's a look at the growth over 2 periods, from 1999 to 2003, and 2003 to 2005. And there are only 2 cases there where the latter exceeds the former. In all of the cases, the growth rate, and it's year-on-year growth. I'm not taking total growth because the 2 periods are different size, but year-on-year growth lowered in the more recent periods. The 2 exceptions just about were Hungarnet and Renater. Sorry? Percentage growth. Oh, sorry. Growth factor. Growth factor. Okay, here's measured monthly traffic on the whole network as published, and we're seeing traffic in thousands of terabytes there per month. But that's the picture. There's growth there, all right, but it's certainly not doubling on an annual basis. It's still very significant, but please get rid of the idea that traffic is doubling every year, if you have it. Yeah, right. Now, just to look at some other areas where there's growth, and this is where you would expect growth because they live on it, and that's the internet exchanges. If they're not generating more traffic, attracting more members, they're not doing their job. They're going downhill. They've got to keep growing. They're bringing in service providers, content providers, even exchanges, voice exchanges, and so on. Lots of other entities are connecting to these. Great. They've got to. And here, I'm just going to run briefly through these, but just to give you, you can look at the slides and look at more detail of these. Incidentally, in Austria, some of them are back to front or the other way around. For example, in Ireland, the time goes from, it goes from left to right. In others, it goes from right to left. But in none of these will you see even doubling in a year. In some use the trick of starting the vertical axis at a point above 0. It emphasizes things. It's good from a marketing point of view. So you'll see the bottom down here in the case of AM6 is 40 gigs, not 0. It doesn't look as sexy if you go down to 0 there. But if you start, if you make 40 gigs look like 0, the growth looks a lot more. You can focus a lot more on the figures that way, but just bear it in mind, because I'm not saying it's an abuse of statistics, but it's another way of using them. And moving abroad to some other exchanges. In the case of Japan, we're looking at, on the left-hand side, 1999 to January 2006. So we're looking over quite a period there. And there's certainly growth, but it is not in the order, it's less than 100% a year. It's about 70% a year. And the case of Toronto Exchange, it's not even that. Now, here's a totally different measure. This is the number of DNS queries to the top-level domain server in Ireland. And again, it runs backwards. But again, in a yearly period, we're seeing growth all right. some variation during the year as well. But it's not even as big as the number of domains registered in IE. And it's a second order thing. Remember, it's just the number of DNS queries. It's not a heavy amount of traffic, but it's a measure. And here's the number of domains registered in .de. DENIC published this, make this available, and I think you can see that in the real growth period, you know, when everyone needed a domain, when the web came to the fore and you needed to get to that as near to the top level as you could, so you registered with .de or whatever. A lot of growth there, but it has changed. It has slowed down a bit. And that's the same thing for Italy. I forget what the two components in blue and red are, but the green is the total growth. And here's another summary, the number of hosts in the network. Again, not a very good measure because a lot of people conceal their A records or conceal their whole domain from AXFR queries, which is necessary for the RIPE host count. But again, it's indicative that there was a growth period and it now seems to be leveling off, both in the whole of Europe, the greater European areas defined by RIPE, and also in IE. Anyway, I better wrap up now. Some very brief conclusions. And I think the first one is, let's get in touch. Let's continue to keep in touch, keep closely in touch with users to find out what they want, by whatever means possible, whether it's by sector or by institution or one-on-one. We've got to keep engaged there to find out what's really going on and what they want to do. We should review projections, not just make projections, but revisit them and, you know, say, well, you know, we said we were going to make that, but we didn't quite do it. We've got to do this in our reports. We've got to say what has happened in budgetary terms and, you know, why we overspent, why we underspent. There are time lags. There are real time lags involved in this, and we've got to explain them. And the same goes for the traffic levels and the capacity that we're spending real money on. If we don't use it, you know, we've got to give reasons. We've got to go back and look and say, that's what we said we'd do. We didn't quite make it. You probably know it in your heads that you couldn't get the capacity or whatever, but we've got to look at these things. I think we should publish results. You know, many of us are in receipt of large amounts of public money, and I think we've got to reciprocate and be public with the results. Make them as widely public as possible. We hear this again and again from reviewers in the Commission and elsewhere. You know, publish, publish, publish. Let people see what you're doing. And it's great to see that happening within the NREN community and within the research community generally. I'm really saying it to myself, to remind myself to keep doing this. And we've got to publish results, and we've got to be clear and consistent. I'll show you that in 2 or 3 slides. So these are slides. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but they are, again, from the Serenate study, and they are summary findings as to what users want. And based on, you know, a lot of polling of the user community, as many of whom I see here, many people who went to a lot of trouble to poll the community and find out in detail what they wanted. And these are some of the things they wanted. There's nothing there about bandwidth per se, nothing there about light paths or huge things. They focus on the application level, and that's fine. And in many cases, we translate this into the need for higher capacity. But that's not explicitly what the users say they want. They want easy, cheap, reliable communications technology. They want video conferencing. That was the most explicit they would get when it came to services. They want video conferencing, so we've got to do that. Anyway, a few more things they wanted, and as I say, all of these are in www.serenate.org. All the material is there, really good. And I said I'd come back to the Serenate projection. And the projection is on the top there. And as near as I can get, because we're not in September 2006 yet, there's the actual figures on the bottom. So projection, actual. there's a mismatch, and you know, maybe it's just a time lag. Maybe we will get there, and maybe I'm not measuring everything, but you know, I'm measuring what's published. And finally, I said, be clear. É an altro paio di maniche. It's another kettle of fish. Kettle? Is pile? Anyway, it's another kettle of fish. It's apples and oranges. I don't want to see things like this, and this worries me when people compare in the same graph actual traffic and peak traffic with light paths. They give away a light path and they say that's 1 gig of traffic. It's not. It's something totally different, and it conflates two things which are not the same, and it marks what people were saying earlier, that NRENs are now involved in the lower layers, which is good. They're doing things there, but they must remember, we must remember not to put two things together like this and to pretend that this is traffic going up like this. It may be the way we handle capacity by giving out wavelengths, but I am concerned when I see projections or displays like this. So, that's it. I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask for questions at this stage, maybe.
Questions? Anyone wants to ask a question? No? Then we move on. Thank you. No. The next speaker is Magnus Strømdal, one of my esteemed colleagues from Uninet in Norway. He's the director for applications and middleware. So basically, he does everything that's not lower layers. Over to you, Magnus.
Yes. Okay. I think they had a sound. Okay. I used to be a techie. I was a techie until a couple of years ago, since I had to be the director. And this is from a techie point of view. I'm not in marketing. I'm not in public relations, even if I attended a couple of the PR groups meeting. And this is based on some of the issues in the life cycle portfolio management work that's actually starting up in Tirana. I put it an outline of customer requirement, service portfolio, marketing, with a question mark, because that's definitely not my department. And something about cooperation, of co-development and things. This is a typical techie way of attacking it. It's a problem, documentation, solving the problem, approach. Why should we care about the customer's requirements? Because we, as Mike showed, the customer requirements in the Senata report was about applications and services. I prefer to call them services, not application, but I misspelled it somewhere in here too. And they actually care about the services, and not the bandwidth or not the throughput or anything. But we have to do something with, we have to follow up on catch new development in technology. Most of the time, new technology is actually cheaper than the ones they replace. We also have to catch the customer's requirement on the right time. Where if we deliver things too late, the customer will go another another place to try to get it. And if we do it too early, they don't need it, and we have spent money on the wrong time. This is customer care. We actually don't have a customer care in UNED. We don't have a customer care unit who ask customers about their needs once every year. And this is one thing that the commercial ISP try to do. They try to ask the customer what you need, and if they can make money of it, they produce it and deliver it. Customer satisfaction. If you have a happy customer, they tend to agree with everything you want them to do, and it's easier to get things done. If you try to overdo it or don't listen to them, they start barking at you at every time and want something else. And we want to reduce cost. I put reduce cost as a motivation because we don't need to deliver things that the customer don't want. And if we deliver, if an NRN delivers what the customer wants, the customer will probably save money because there's more of them who want the same solution, same service. The customers, who are they? Is the customer the same as the users? Mike is shaking his head. Our customer, for a typical NRN, the customers are university, colleges, schools, research institutes, go on. But the users are students, teachers, scientists, and that's two different groups of people. And we have a contract with the customer, but we don't have a contract with the user. That's the customer who has the contract with the user. There's a lot of research projects who also count as customers because that's a research project. EU-funded projects come up with new demands and be the one we actually have to deliver a new service to. Another customer that's maybe a bit neglected and don't always be listened to is actually the owner of the NRN. The situation is very different between among the countries who the owner are, but mostly they're actually owned by the department or by the government. That's a bit different between the countries. National law and regulation also act as a customer to enforce regulation that have make us changes in our services and do things with, like the Italian had to register every user on the network. Yes, there's more. I just listed one on top of my head. Mike also had a better presentation of what kind of requirements we're actually talking about. And I noticed I put up application. I actually meant services. I was thinking about services, but I wrote the application of. Bandwidth is the one we always have taken care of. We like to add bandwidth, throw bandwidth at every problem. Security. And security is a real demanding requirement, and it's the opposite of the bandwidth. If you throw bandwidth on it, you can't throw security on it, because security tends to reduce the amount of throughput in every kind of equipment, or it make it more difficult to use. John is going to talk about customer support afterwards, so I go fast over it. But actually, there's a increasing demand for support and availability for the network. It should be 24/7, all year, always there. And if somebody broke it, as I was talking about earlier, should be allowed to break and research network. But if you break it, it's not available. High performance computing is also a topic in the requirements. This is not a high performance computing forum or area, because they're actually separate departments that deal with it. But it's one of the requirements from the customer, and that's like CERN, that I like more CPU cycles from the NRNs, and like us to have grid projects. There's a customer requirement for storage. Maybe not as storage of the user files, but the customer, even the university or the research institute, want to have a storage to backup files, share files with other, and can't share it from within their own organization. And it's easy to use. That's a real demanding requirement. And as was talked about in the previous session, session before lunch, about everything is wrapped into web to make it easy to use, and the users don't always see a web process for every kind of application or service. There's more, but I took them all on the top of my head. Customer requirements, gathering. UNET don't tend to gather customer requirements in a organized way. We just talk with our customers, and we have no good way of keeping track of all kind of requests from the customers. We have, the best we do is we have a log from the NOC every day. We have a log from it every day, so tell us what kind of request the NOC has got every day, but that's not the same as the customer's requirement. That's the network operators on the customer that have talked to us. The Turena run the questionnaire every year, but the questionnaire don't keep. At the moment, it don't contain anything about services and what the customer needs. They talk something about bandwidths, but that's from the NRN, not from our customers. And we don't do a questionnaire. I know some of the NRNs actually do a road tour, visit most of their customers every year. As a techie, we tend to send techies to every customer once in a while, but techie isn't good to report back questions and requirements and what they actually have talked with a customer about. And probably techies isn't best to do that customer survey stuff. What services other NRNs are developing and delivering to their customers is one of the way we actually gather that we want to be on the same list as all the others, and we also look at them even if we don't need the service. And you have the new technology approach. This is new. This is interesting. Let's do it. Who needs it? New research projects areas actually came up with some requests, like the gathering of cosmic data and such things. They actually demands bandwidth, demands storage, but that's a very small part of our customers. Are we providing the most cost-efficient solutions? Do we think about cost when we produce services? Do we just produce it because it's interesting or new and challenging? Do we actually think is this actually a cost-efficient solution? And I'm not sure if this is the right English word for it, but over-provisioning of services, delivering more bandwidth, more capacity, more storage. Is it actually what the customer wants? And do we follow up the customers and actually start talking with them about what they could use it for when they deliver 10 times what they need? If they ask for 10 megabit and we supply them with a gigabit, do we actually ask them what they want to use it for? It's often cheaper to deploy and at least it's a lot cheaper to deploy an 100 megabit than 10 in some reasons. Okay, next topic, service portfolios. This is one of the main work areas in the lifecycle portfolio management group. But we had a service description or service, okay, something we could call a service portfolio. We had a list of what we delivered, but we couldn't divide between all included or pay as you go. We have, as far as I know, we have one service we actually charge more. When at one service we charge except everything you got all included. And that's related to the difference founding model for the RNN. Some of the NRNs get all their funding from the government straight as one box of money, and some others have to collect monies from the customers. Depending on which kind of funding model you probably have different service or ways of describing your services. There are also a lot of different definitions on services. What's on service and what's not a service? Is a spam filtering service included in your email, or is it a separate service? The lifecycle portfolio management group tried to make a standard way to describe services. You can compare them afterwards. But the quality of the service, not quality of service, but quality of service in another way with SLA, service level descriptions, and service level specification. If you don't have a service level agreement with your customer, you could make your own service level description at least to describe what you deliver. One is between you and the customer. The other is what you say you deliver to the customer. To create a service portfolio, it's more formalistic. You have more documentation. Actually, it's a lot of work. But the lifecycle portfolio management group tried to make a standard for them so you can make them comparable. You can compare your own service portfolio with another one. That would help. It would be easier to, if somebody already have documented a service and you could take a copy of it and add or reduce it with what you deliver, it could be easier to keep them. If you want to create a service portfolio, who's the reader? Is it for the techies, or if it's for the customers, the management of the customer? We have to be clear who is the target for it. and why? I think all of us need to be more specific, more clear in what we deliver, and that's one of the reasons. But there's some others. If we want to share them, we need one common description. We need a common description template, and we probably need to use the same language. In Europe, we probably will use English for everything of it. And if you start making service portfolios, you have to keep them updated. It's no need for a 6-month-old service portfolio. It's probably going to be outdated. And as fast as they change, they probably change faster than that, but it's a lot of work, actually. This is not. This is not my work area. Marketing is something that the commercialized ISPs is very good at, but at least I don't know very many NRNs that actually do a lot of marketing. SurfNet has a project where they try to be more visible. That's one of the few. Users need to be aware of the NRN, which, if a user, or if a really demanding user, like the ones that actually needs light paths, they need to know which NRN they have to cross, which NRN they have to cross with the light path they actually want to set up. They know it. The customer also need to be aware of us. And we have to be clear about the difference between the NRNs and the commercial ISPs, because there is still a difference. But NRNs tend to get more and more equal to the ISPs with less research and development. We have to tell about new services, and we have to tell about the new services at the time where they're in the prototype phase, or even on the late ID phase, where if this is interesting. It's too late when you have finalized it and it's in production, because then it needs another period to get them to use it. If they're aware of it earlier on, they're probably ready to use it when we release the service. Okay, the funding bullet pops up again, because some NRN actually have to be visible to get funding. Marketing is actually a way to get feedback from customers. Because if you get more visible, they actually know where to request. Yeah. Okay. Levels of cooperation. There is a lot of cooperation going on. Actually, there is most of the cooperation is going on between our customers, not between the customers and the NRN. And there are even less between the NRNs. But it's a way to learn from each other, get shorter time to market on new services if you couldn't co-develop it or work together on it. Yeah, we could get comparable service portfolios. We could be more cost efficient with sharing development costs on services. And if you join somebody in developing, you actually could be one of the frontiers on that service, making it. Okay, that one I went through earlier with which level of cooperation we could be talking about. There's also a lot of cooperation between NRN and commercial companies, software houses, hardware vendors, and also towards some ISPs. Share your IDs. There was a buff on sharing IDs yesterday evening. It was interesting because there was a lot of discussion on how we could share a little more. Invite others to cooperate to the co-development. And okay, there's one bullet we were really bad at. Writing documentation, at least we are bad at it in Norway. We need a common language, and in Norway we have a problem. We speak Norwegian, tend to speak everything in Norwegian and not English as a main language, and then we document in Norwegian. We should have been documenting everything in English. This would be the best way. And publish, as Mike said, publish. This is an interesting one. That's an area we can save costs. Co-buying services, joint call for tender. The Terena global signing deal on the Terena server certificates is a very good example of how it could be done. But SoBand, they had to actually do the work, and it's a lot of work. And we need a partner for doing that kind of joint call for tenders. And at the moment, the only one we have is Terena. Fee for joining and call and open for everybody is obviously. We could also start thinking about co-running services, sharing cost running a service, so buying from another NRN or from actually buying it from the customer and delivering it to other NRNs, exchanging. Yeah, and true. In time. Questions?
If you want to hear a true story about what we're going to do about all the stuff that Magnus said, we don't do that. There's a talk in the session on public projects tomorrow. No comments. Great. Thank you, Magnus.
Can people hear? I seem to be very loud now. I'm not frightening you all. My name is John Cheevers from Dante. I think I've changed the title of this presentation from my original one. It's now helping to enable international research projects, which I hope sums up what I'll talk about today. First, perhaps I should say a little about Giant 2. I'm sure lots of you know lots about it, and probably quite a few of you more than I do. It is a new kind of network. It's if anyone saw Marian Garcia's presentation, certainly they'll recognize that it is probably the most advanced type of network, most advanced network of its type in the world. And from the point of view of technologies, the most radical departure from previous generations of international research networks in Europe is that this is a hybrid network. It provides both IP services and dedicated switch circuits. So in this way, it is designed to provide specific services for specific users, as well as what has previously performed well in the past as an IP network to be shared by all researchers and educationalists. So if I can say something about who the people who use Giant2 are. It has a user base of probably 30 million users, about 3 million of which will be researchers, and they span 34 countries across Europe, and also increasingly in different world regions. The fields they cover are enormous, ranging from primary schools for children sending emails to nuclear physicists, weather forecasters, and cancer specialists. As I say, the low end is probably someone sending an email and would manage with a dial-up connection, but other people want dedicated circuits of multiple gigabits per second. So there's obviously a challenge, not just for Dante, the operators of the Giant2 network, but also for the NRANs who are connected by it. So to try and understand the Giant2 user base, there's a segmentation exercise, which is an important part of the Giant2 project, which aims to develop a structured approach to assessing the users, and with the aim of improving communication both to users and from users. So to users, making them aware of the network, understanding what it can provide them, and the services it offers. From the users, to understand what they want, and to meet their needs and understand their requirements. Unfortunately, the segmentation will take some time. It's not a trivial exercise with the size of the user base, and also, I suppose, it doesn't help that as an organization, we don't connect directly to the users. We're behind the NRANs, so it's not an easy task to segment that user base. And in the meantime, we still have to support these users. So the aim is probably to target specific user groups and hopefully achieve desired outcomes, whatever that might mean. We need to decide what outcomes we want. Do we want to see increased traffic? Do we want to see the network bandwidth being used? And if so, then is that by existing users? Do we want to reach out to new fields of research and education? Do we want to sell the specialized services? And I use sell in a very generic sense, in that all these services are provided free to the users across Giant2. Do we want to reach out to the maximum number of users, or do we want to provide services for those with the most demands, the highest demands, the really new generation technologies? There's also a strong element of user support which probably should look at enhancing performance. There are lots of users out there who are not necessarily network experts and would benefit from people from within the community who can help them optimize their network applications and across the networks. So, taking a stab in the dark, and this has probably been defined a long time ago, certainly before the Giant2 project started, was the term demanding users was pulled out of the air. Quite how we define these is something else, but I'm going to give it a go. These are applications with the highest level of network requirements. So they require maximum bandwidth, they require services such as quality of service, they may require dedicated circuits. They also tend to be the ones who need most input from the networking people. I think an easy way to define people in this bracket too are the ones who need the research networks the most. So these are people with applications which probably couldn't exist without research networks. They couldn't go to their local ISP and find their requirements met. Conversely, they're probably the people we need as research networks. If these people weren't out there asking for high-end services, and if they didn't want lots of bandwidth and dedicated circuits from point to point, then we certainly wouldn't be able to justify the large expenditure which is made right across Europe on research networks. So they certainly help justify the existence of these networks. It's also the case that we need to keep an eye on some projects. From an operational point of view, if someone suddenly decides to dump an enormous amount of data across an IP network, then it's of great interest to the operational team that they're going to do that, and whether there can be any changes in configuration made to avoid congesting the network and impacting other users. So it's from the most basic level, it is important for us to understand what people are doing with the network on these highest levels. I also sometimes wear a PR hat, and these are the users which are visible to the world at large. If a project like the LHC, which is world famous and everyone knows there's been an enormous amount of money put into it, is relying on research networks such as the ones we operate, then it certainly is good publicity for us, and it does help inspire other users to put their applications onto the network. Now, by narrowing it down a little to this group of demanding users, I think we've reduced the number of groups we're looking at, but probably not the variety. Almost by definition, these very demanding users are unique in the way they want to use the network. So we can't be too prescriptive about the way we look after them. There's no universal quick fix which will help them all. But I think it is useful to formalize a framework, and it must be a framework which can handle all user requests from the lowest end to the highest end, and it's robust enough to meet the most complex requirements. I should also point out here, I think that user support is related to the sort of service portfolio management aspects, but it also has a strong coordination role. So a big part of this is coordinating between the operational functions, the planning functions for networks, finance in some cases, and also PR functions. So I think it's more than just managing a portfolio of services. It is a project management and a coordination role too. And this framework for supporting users should recognize that. Essentially, any framework should capture requirements. It should be able to store and access information. It should allow planning and design of solutions, and then manage the implementation and operation of that solution for the particular application. Okay, I'm now going to say a little about some of the applications that are using Géant2 in this demanding users bracket. Probably one of the more famous ones, and the one that's been going for a few years now, is EVLBI. This is a radio astronomy technique, which very briefly uses a range of radio telescopes spread across either Europe or increasingly across the world. They point all their telescopes at the same point in the sky. So you have lots of telescopes in different places all looking at the same point. They then all collect lots of data and send it all to a single correlating supercomputer. Now, the reason they do this is it's a bit like a telephoto lens. The bigger the separation of these antennae, the better the resolution of the image they create. So the bigger the lens you have, the more detail you can resolve from the picture you take. I'm not a radio astronomer, as you can probably tell. So why do they use research networks? Essentially, it's convenience and speed. If they can get all their data to their supercomputer quickly, A, they can get their job done quickly, and B, it means that if something is going wrong, they know about it there and then. In the past, they've used tapes to transfer data, and the tapes can arrive days or weeks after the experiment's finished, only to find out there was some mistake made at one of the telescopes, and all the data is useless. So this allows them to keep a real-time eye on what's happening with their observations. It also allows them a new scientific technique. So it goes beyond an improvement in technology. It allows new science, which is that they can look at transitory events. So events they wouldn't necessarily know were there, but because they can process the data in real time, they can look at transitory events in the sky. There's a new project started in radio astronomy which is called Express. This is aiming to productionize the technique. Several NRENs are partners in this project. It intends to increase the number of telescopes that are connected, increase the bandwidth to the telescopes that are connected, and expand from the previous array of telescopes in Europe to across the world. This project's already started, and they have had some successful results. So, I seem to have... My first heading seems to be missing a bit. Anyway, monitoring. We've set counters up for these people, so they can look at the number of packets transferred across Géant2. In their recent science measurement, there were several million packets transferred and none were dropped, so I think we were quite pleased with that. We've also created a weather map for EVLBI so that the radio astronomers can look at the status of the network whilst they're taking their observations. There are planning activities associated with these experiments, which involve NRENs, the radio astronomers, and we meet probably 3 times a year to discuss that. And also the Géant2 Performance Enhancement Response Team are working with this group to enhance end-to-end performance. Looking at the new structures in place for Géant2, that they're already intending to take up point-to-point services for radio astronomy. We have requests from the UK and Germany for point-to-point services into the Netherlands. And I think most of the European sites are expecting to take advantage of that. And we expect a reasonable mesh of these circuits to be in place certainly next year. The switching capabilities of Géant2 means that these light paths or point-to-point services are not simply static and can be switched. So, for example, the UK telescopes want to connect to the correlating computer in the Netherlands, but similarly, there's a Swedish telescope wants to connect to a correlator in the UK. So it should be possible to switch between those over Géant 2. I just made a mention of some of the new telescopes coming online there. Probably the most relevant thing to say is that Géant 2 isn't alone, and there are other counterpart networks in different world regions which are allowing this EVLBI technique to be expanded across the globe. And a further user, of which I think there are at least one or two people in the audience from this organization, is the European Space Agency. They use research networks across Europe to create what they call their HiScene network, which is the high-speed ESA Earth observation network. It connects 11 sites in 7 countries across Europe, and is used for Earth observation, so measurements. So that's looking at climate change, oceanography, these sort of measurements. So just a very brief explanation on, of why they're using the research networks. They collect data from satellites, which transmit the data to discrete satellite base stations on Earth. So almost in reverse of what the radio astronomers do, these particular sites will collect all the data from a satellite before transferring it to many other sites for storage and analysis. So they're using research networks across Europe to achieve these high volume data transfers. Géant 2 is actively engaged with ESA to try and improve the levels of service achieved and look towards the future, and as more sites come online, as bandwidths increase. And it's probably important to say that not all these requirements are technical. Because there are many sites involved and lots of organizations, it's a multi-domain problem. We have to consider carefully the coordination of these services, and it probably comes in to the category covered by the LCPM task force, the life cycle and portfolio management, because there are strong demands to harmonize services between NRENs. These big user groups who operate in many different NREN domains are very interested in having the same services provided to them in different countries. And I think that's an important point. We're also looking into the provision of new services for mission monitoring and control data that's essential. So hopefully those circuits can be protected. And also using the global reach of Géant to look at long-distance TCP transfers and connection of new sites beyond Europe. Now, I'm getting close to my time, so I won't say a great deal about Muppet. There is an exhibition stand associated with them in the foyer, so they can probably explain far better than I can. It's a network a European project looking at next generation network technologies, such as GMPLS and ASON. It has many partners across Europe and is provided connectivity by several NRENs. In fact, to enable this project's requirements, a total of 68 label switch paths were configured across Europe because of the multiple domains crossed. And so that took quite a bit of coordination, particularly as it happened around the time of the migration from Géant to Géant 2, when a lot of new circuits were being implemented, and the management and handling of that was reasonably complex. Fortunately, the Dante operations team did very well, and I think everyone was happy with the solution. I understand they're giving a demonstration in the foyer too, so it's probably worth a look. A related area, which I sort of touched on when I mentioned the different user groups, is the global reach of Géant 2. it's of increasing relevance to researchers to collaborate not just within Europe, but beyond Europe. And I was surprised to learn that GERNT2 actually provides 48 different connections globally. So that's external to Europe. And there are now projects in Latin America, ALICE, which has created the Clara network, in North Africa, UMed Connect, CERN in Southeastern Europe, TNC2006 in the Asia-Pacific region. An up-and-coming project is Orient to provide a dedicated connection between Europe and China at high bandwidth. And also there are transatlantic links and other circuits which are in the planning stage, such as to India. It's interesting to note, because I think some of the other speakers discussed the kind of the push-pull nature of providing services. Certainly, in terms of providing international connectivity, there are now several international research projects which only exist because of this infrastructure is there. So I think it is a two-way thing. People do recognize that infrastructure is available and do use it. So that's quite reassuring, I suppose. So looking to the future, I'm hoping to create a dedicated user support database. I think it's important to draw together all the different strands. I don't know if I've confused you today with all these little bits and bobs all over the different parts of networking, but there's a great deal of cross-referencing needed, and I think a good, well-structured database with references in the user groups, the network services, the circuits they're using, and also the human resources, the people who are involved in all the different organizations. I think all this needs to be cross-referenced very carefully, and that's something I'm very keen to put in place. There are also significant strides being made in the GERNT2 project, looking at measurement and monitoring. So the perf sonar visualization tools are very powerful. We have a demonstration of that on the Dante stand in the foyer too. I don't know, not as many people as we'd hoped to have gotten to see it, so perhaps you will do before the end of the conference. And this allows users or networkers to look at network performance data across multiple domains, so right down from the end sites to the across all the network domains. So that's something I hope will be rolled out as it goes beyond the prototype stage, which it's at the moment. And I should also mention the Terrainer Task Force Lifecycle and Portfolio Management, which I think provides a valuable information exchange between NRENs, both and Dante on the European level, to look at harmonizing services and what we can learn from the services provided by different organizations. So, in summary, I think GERNT2 and the NRENs it connects provide unique opportunities for academics across Europe. And I think this is something we probably forget, that it isn't the same in all world regions. There are services which wouldn't be dreamt of not very long ago, and people are actively using them. And it's different from any previous research backbone. There are services there now which are dedicated to users, circuits which connect point to point, but for particular users. So it isn't anymore just a shared infrastructure, but it is dedicated provision for users. And of course, because these services are new, it's important that they're rolled out in an efficient way, and a way which allows users to derive maximum benefit from these services. I think it's important, as the last point, to mention that we like to provide support at a European level, but that can only complement what's done in the NRENs. And it's essential that all the network domains work together to provide a cohesive end-to-end solution for these users. So, I don't really want to keep you out of the sunlight anymore. And there is excellent coffee. But if you have any questions, please do ask.
Thank you. I'm Hervé Perrault. I'm dealing with research infrastructures. I see that in your presentation that Géant is in contact with ESO or ESA, which are well-organized research organizations, and therefore you can offer a service. How are you organized to answer to the needs of scientific communities which are not as well organized, which are maybe also in kind of network, for example, in the field of environment, for example, in the field of biomedical research, for example, in the field of social research. Do you consider that Géant will go towards this community, or do you expect that this research community will go to Géant? And if not, let's say, how do you see, is your vision to improve the links between the scientific communities and the NREN community?
Am I back? Yes. I think this is certainly something which is being looked at in the segmentation exercise as part of Géant 2. There's a dedicated work package which looks at segmenting the user base, and it's particularly interesting for us to look at communities which are not traditionally part of the research network area. I don't think there's many physicists you need to explain the benefits of research networks to, but as you say, if you look at social sciences or cultural exchange programs, I think there is a certain amount of PR that's needed, and I think I won't preempt the outcome of the segmentation work, but certainly I would imagine it would be useful to target these specific groups and to create publicity materials which do encourage them and explain in perhaps a not too technical way what benefits can be given, and perhaps also show existing projects which it doesn't. I can imagine that say a biological database which currently uses Géant 2 would use a very similar technique to one in social sciences. So I think that certainly is something for the future, and it is planned for in the project.
First of all, I would like to thank you for referencing the Muppets. I'm one of the Muppet Show. So, but coming back to a more serious question, you have shown that you are going for a new dedicated transport network service. Are you seeing an increased demand and requests from the customer side on this one?
In terms of the point-to-point circuits. Yes, yes, we have had several orders now for point-to-point services. They're being directed via the NRENs, but yes, several have now been received. So we're implementing those at the moment. So there is real demand. It isn't just pie in the sky.
Let me clarify the question and the answer. The end-to-end is between two users sitting in a national research network. So it's the user goes to the research networks, is national research networks. The research network asks for, okay, and this is done already for a number of things. I mean, from ING physics to supercomputing, this kind of. What John was also stressing is the fact that Géant 2 is probably the first and the unique network able to interconnect end-to-end a number of sites. Our goal is that we should do that all over the world, not just in Europe. And so what we are waiting is that other research networks in other continents apply more or less the same model with different technologies if they want. But we would like to do that. And then, of course, Géant 2 is there to provide this link to the other international networks. So we have regions everywhere in the world able to do that. We have already end-to-end running over Europe. Probably we are going to establish also over transatlantic in a short time by October. It depends on the Americans, not depends on us. And the principle is that if you need the high bandwidth, then you can have a network, an end-to-end network with up to 10 gigabit a day. But otherwise, like a moped, you can have LSP at lower bandwidth and have So, but in Europe is more or less possible to do a number of things, and they are already in place, and they are already working. So the service challenge for LXC is working since last March.
Just to bring together remarks made by Magnus and by John, I think Magnus identified the distinction between customer and end user, and then John also said that Géant is at one further remove from these people through the NRENs, and important, and I think it behoves us, certainly in the NRENs, to get as close as we can to our customers, and through them with the needs of the users, and on the other side to keep closely in touch with Géant. I appreciate the difficulty in this, but I think it just goes back to the need to keep even more closely in touch with the users and not to deviate too much from that. I endorse everything that John said in that respect, and putting that together with what Magnus said, it makes it even more of a challenge. Thanks.
Do you want to comment on that? Or
No, I think that's pretty self-evident. Yeah,
yeah.
great. So, well,
Thank you.
thanks for your attention.
And thank you to John. There's coffee outside. There might even be ice cream.